Welcome to the Romantasy Library. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Romantasy Library. I'm Kate Perkins, and today I'm interviewing epic fantasy romance author Nicole Platania. She is absolutely one of my favorite authors. She has written the Curse of Ophelia series, and Nicole harbors a love for broken and twisty characters, stories that feel like puzzles, and all things romance. She can always be found with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine in hand, ready to discuss everything from celebrity gossip to your latest book theories. Anyway, I'm so excited to be here with her today and share this conversation with you all. I know I'm talking a ton. We'll get to Nicole in just one second. I wanted to also say to you that she recently announced that book 4, The Myths of Ophelia, will be released November 21st. And The Breaker of Stars, her novella, which is, I should have said that probably first, 3.5, right? The novella in between. And that one will be focusing on Cypherian's and Vale's story, and that will be out July 25th, which I cannot wait for. Anyway, how are you doing, Nicole?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
Very excited to chat today.
I am too. How are you feeling about The Breaker of Stars coming out soon?
I am very excited for it. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit of a diversion from the main books in the series because it does follow two characters whose points of view we haven't seen so far. But it also is a lot more focused on the romance in their story, whereas there's definitely still a plot to it. There's definitely still the fantasy elements, but it does focus a lot on the romance, whereas the main novels focus a lot on the epic fantasy side of things, as well as building the romance stories. So I'm very excited for viewers to read that.
I'm so excited to get Cypherian. Am I saying his name right?
Yeah, you are.
Okay.
Cypherian.
Cypherian and Vale's story. They are both very intriguing characters, and I might have a slight book crush on Cypherian. Even though we haven't had his point of view, I'm like, I feel like I have a little crush on him.
He really stole people's hearts early on.
Yes, he really has. Okay, so for the listeners, would you mind explaining your series?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that's kind of hard to do because there is so much that happens in the first 3 books. Whew.
Yeah, it's hard to do without spoilers. But if you're new to it, the Curse of Ophelia series is a new adult epic romantic fantasy series, and it follows a young warrior as she is cursed. So she knows that she's about to die from this curse that hasn't been seen in over 2 years since a war ended. I'm used to talking on TikTok and like having to censor my words, so I'm trying to remind myself that I can actually say she's going to die.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. You can say that.
Yeah, say those things on social media, but here I can. So her curse is going to take her life, and she sort of accepts it because she's in a really dark place. Because with the end of the war, she also lost the boy that she loves, who was they were supposed to lead their people together. So she's in this really dark place, makes her peace with the fact that she's going to die when all of a sudden a mysterious visitor sends her on this quest. And she goes on this quest with her best friends, her found family, and her sister. And her whole goal is to try to find the boy she loves because she is the only one who believes that he's still alive, and to restore her war-torn warrior clan to glory before the curse takes her life. And so that's where we start. And then along the way, she uncovers political schemes and ancient prophecies and a lot of drama. And book 2 starts dealing with more of that. Book 1 is really that quest and the journey of a lot of healing for her.
Yeah, Nicole, that was really impressive how you just put that synopsis together, especially because there are so many things that happen even from like book 1 into book 2. Holy moly, I was wondering how you were going to do that. But so many shifts. And yeah, when I first read the first book, I really loved the world building is really excellent, everybody. And I think you do a beautiful job too of like bringing these characters to life. I say this in like every single podcast, so I apologize to everybody, but I am a therapist. And so I am all about the character development. That is like so important to me. And there is a ton of growth that Ophelia goes through. And a lot of
Yes.
uncovered secrets. It's so good. I love it.
Yeah, she's
Ah.
definitely a tough one in the beginning. But
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people, like, if you've ever been in a really dark place, you might relate to her a little bit. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
um, but if not, if you don't relate to her, maybe just stick with her a little bit
Yes.
because she's working on it. She's really trying to heal,
Mhm.
and she has some really great people by her side to help her along the way.
Yeah. And you really laid the groundwork in that first book. I always wonder how you guys do this as authors, but especially when it's going to be a series, like how to pace yourself from book to book. Um,
It's tough.
yeah.
It's tough because you want to give everybody the good stuff right there in the beginning
Uh-huh.
because that's what's going to really hook the readers
Uh-huh.
in. But a lot of it is a waiting game, and looking back on it, that's some of the most fun parts of it is getting to lay the groundwork and getting to do all of the foreshadowing and all of the little things that now that I'm writing some of the last books in the series, I'm kind of picking up all those breadcrumbs. And
Mm-hmm.
looking back on it, it's really fun. I know it was definitely difficult in the beginning, and I'm sure I'll be saying the next thing when I write, or I'll be saying this again when I write the next thing,
Mm-hmm.
is that, you have to remember where you're going and you have to have the bird's eye view to kind of see all of it on all those moving pieces at once.
Yeah, because there are a ton of moving pieces. This is truly an epic fantasy romance. Um, and there's so many layers and a lot of complexities that make the story what it
Mhm.
is. And again, the character arcs and development, I feel like is a piece of it. So it's like you have this bird eye view, and then you're also keeping track of all of these details. I don't know. That's a lot.
Yeah,
That would be a lot. Are you currently writing book four, or is that done? Because I know we know it releases November 21st,
yeah,
but
it's not done, but
okay.
I currently have a little bit of a break from it because it's with one of my editors. So I'll get that back at the beginning of August, and I'll do another round of developmental edits. So to fix up all the structure where it needs to be fixed up to make sure all the character arcs are arcing just the way I want them to be. And then we'll go through copy edits and proofreading and all of those kind of final steps where for me, that's when it really starts to feel like a book. It doesn't really feel like a book until I've gotten it to copy edits because I'm still moving around chapters and pieces and things at this point.
Okay. Yeah, that is
Yeah.
fascinating to me. This whole process is fascinating to me. Apart from like actually loving the series, how you write and how you're writing the series is really fascinating. How many books will there be in this series? I don't think I know that.
There will be five, well, if you count
Okay.
the novella, six.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, good. So we're not like this fourth book, it's not like done.
No, there's one more big we're building up to a lot in this final book. It's going to be a big one. It's going to
Mhm.
have so many pieces that I can't talk about, but I really wish I could because there's a lot of exciting things that are coming in book four that are going to be setting the stage for a really epic finale.
It's already so epic. Like I feel like I've cried so much in this series, and then I felt all the feels. There are some big feels, big feelings in this series, which
There are.
I'm all about.
I don't write with the intention to make people cry, but I'm a very emotionally driven and very character
Mhm.
driven reader. So I write to make people feel how my favorite books have made me feel.
Oh, I love that. I was gonna say this, the Trials of Ophelia, where we're like left off. Holy shit. There is so much. I what? There's so much. So I am very interested to see how the next book comes together.
Hmm. Yeah, I always kind of thought of Trials as definitely a warfare book.
Mm.
There's a lot of battles, there's a lot of strategy
Mhm.
and planning and things, and some people don't like warfare books as much, and that's totally fine. Everyone has a different love and a different reason that they pick up a
Mhm.
fantasy book. But that was where we were in the story. That's what Trials had to be. It had to be about all of those battles and a lot of discovery. And then Myths is a little bit more of the magic and mythology book.
I'm
So
excited.
that's sort of how I compare the two, but
Mhm.
really they're almost two halves of a whole.
Mhm.
The story really it wouldn't have fit in one book to do books 3 and 4 together because it was just way too long.
Yeah.
But they are in a lot of ways
Yeah.
just perfectly fit together. In
Yeah.
my mind, they're two halves of a whole.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, you say it's a warfare book for sure. As I was reading it though, like I mean, there's a ton of quests and adventure. And yes, there are like battles but I don't know. I loved it. I'm not normally like a huge warfare person, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I
Well,
loved
you
it.
get a lot of the character building because
Yes.
of that. So
Yes. Okay.
it puts you in.
Yep. And then we dive into deeper, into these different characters. Hey yo, time for an ad. My friend Bree is the proud owner of Miles on Paper. It is an online bookstore where magic and adventure come to life through the pages of indie books. At Miles on Paper, they are passionate about connecting independent authors with readers, and they do this by curating unique blind date book bundles, custom book boxes, blind date puzzles, and a remarkable collection of traditionally published books. By the way, their blind date book bundles are so much fun. I had the honor of getting one myself. I highly recommend. You can find her website at www.milesonpaper.com. Check them out. So, what gave you the idea? Like, what compelled you to write this story?
So Ophelia came to me first. I always start with my characters before
Okay.
I know what their stories are. That's just how my mind works. And I just had this image of this really sad girl who was looking for the boy she loves, and she was cursed and trying to figure out how to resolve that, how to live with that, how to find him. And that's kind of where it all started. And then I sat down and I knew that I wanted the world to be in a way familiar and yet different. And that's kind of how I settled with the different warrior clans, because they can be likened to rival kingdoms or different territories and things. But I wanted them to be, so familiar in that sense, but I wanted them to be unique in the sense that, they're warriors. They're not nobles. So they kind of play by a different set of rules.
Mhm.
And they all have these like different magics, which the Mystique Warriors being one of the
Mhm.
major warrior clans, their responsibility is more to be a guard of magic. But some
Mhm.
of the minor warrior clans have, they guide magic. So they all actually can use magic in different ways, which we'll see more throughout the series and we'll see
Okay.
more in the future of the world and things like that. But
Yeah.
that's kind of where I started with the world itself. Was I wanted that familiar and yet something new.
Yes. And I definitely picked up on that reading The Curse of Ophelia because I haven't, I mean, I think typically, right, in epic fantasy romance, we have like fae or like very distinct, I don't know, species that we've, that we get kind of
Yeah.
used to. And I was going to ask you to explain the warrior distinction and how that's different because it did feel very different.
They do have magic, they can use magic and they are still beings of magic. So the heightened strength and speed and agility and quicker healing and things like that that are sort of almost second nature to magical beings. They have all of those, and those powers are kind of enhanced when they go through their
Mm-hmm.
rituals. All the different clans are different. For the Mystiques, it's the undertaking. So if they survive the undertaking, all of those things are enhanced more for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then the magics are all just unique to the warrior clans, and something that we'll learn more throughout this series or other series I want to write is, we will see more of the Fae and we'll kind of learn how their magic is a little
Yeah.
bit different. And there are other creatures in the world that we may or may not see in this series, but possibly other series who their magic also varies. So there's a lot of digging down in this world that we haven't done yet.
I'm excited. Yeah, because there is a character that is introduced at some point, and this character is not a warrior, and so I was wondering too, like, okay, how does this character differ? You know, um, so
Is it, did we see him in book one or did he?
ah, okay, I've got the books right here. Um, I don't know how much you want me to say or not say, but he made a deal with two
Okay, yeah. So
characters.
it's the Fae. He's in book
Yes, the
one. He
Fae.
shows up
Okay.
in book one.
Yes.
We will definitely see more of him. I can tell you that for sure.
He is also intriguing to me. I want to know more about him too. So,
He has some good things to share.
mhm. And then, by the way, I did want to show off your covers because I think they're so pretty.
Thank you. I'm obviously biased, but I love them.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. I'm a sucker for a good cover too. Oops, I
Me too.
totally just did them backwards. Okay,
Oh,
guys,
that's
this is the first one. And of course, I'm showing this last. Okay, and then this is the second one. Good Lord.
fun.
And then this is the last. Yeah, what we got. Cool.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the series came to you because Ophelia came to you first, and then you kind of built the story around her, and then
Yeah,
it just grew.
in a way I did. I knew her personal journey, at least for that first book. I knew what her personal journey was going to be, and then I really sat down to start thinking about it, and I was like, oh, there's so much more here.
Yeah.
The Mystique Warriors were actually like a spin-off. They were mentioned in one line in this other book that I had written first, that I was actually querying before I decided to self-publish.
Oh,
And that's in a whole different world, and it's completely separate, but they did mention the Mystique Warriors living in another world. And they stuck in my head from that moment. I was like,
very
I
cool.
want to do something with them one day. I know that there's more to them there.
Mm.
And so, in a way, even though nothing happened out of that first book, this
Mhm.
whole thing happened out of that first book.
That is amazing, and talking with authors, learning more about their backgrounds, which also we'll get to with you, is fascinating to me. Learning that, like, oh my gosh, like the series that I actually have in my hands is not the first book that you've written, in your process of getting published and the journey there, I can imagine takes a lot of grit too to get to where you are. And especially having, gosh, this is a very successful series. And
Oh,
yeah, it's so good.
yeah.
Okay, so can you share a little bit about that process of like, okay, you had another book that you wrote and then you were querying that and then you shifted gear. Yeah, can you share a little bit more about that?
I've always been a writer. In high school, I used to write a lot. And I kind of had this idea that grew up with me through the ages. Like I think I first started writing it when I was 12. And I had a dream one night and I started writing this book. And the characters were at that point, my age. And then they got older. As I got older, it became, a young adult book and then a new adult book and everything. So when I was in college, I definitely didn't write as much as I had before. And I didn't read as much either. And then the pandemic hit. I was about a year out of college. And my roommate at the time was applying to medical school. So she was really busy studying for her MCAT and working on her applications and things. And I just had a lot of time on my hands, obviously. So I was like, you know what? Why don't I go back to this thing that I used to love, this thing that I wanted to make my career? When I was 16 years old, I thought I was going to get published as a 16-year-old.
Wow.
And I took it seriously and I went back to that original idea, and it had had so many different iterations and so many unfinished drafts lived in my computer, and I took pieces of things that I liked still and I just rebuilt it, and I finished that book, and I started going down the process of finding beta readers and editing and querying that. And it was when I was querying that I dug into the Mystique Warriors, because the advice is always, when you're querying one book, start something completely separate. Don't start writing the sequel because you never know what's going to happen. Just dive in with a different project.
Okay, by the way, can I just interject? That would be so hard for me to do because I'd be so like single-minded, like so focused on one series. Oh my word.
It
But
was
you had
really
this
hard.
other, yeah, I can imagine. Anyway,
Yeah, it's really hard. And I mean, I definitely dabbled with the sequel to that book, when I had
I
an
mean,
idea,
of
but
course.
I did start focusing on other things. And in that time, I also went back to school. So I had been working in marketing, and I decided that I really wanted to take creative writing seriously. So I went to grad school for creative writing. I went to a year-long program in London, and I just kind of took that year to really dedicate myself to this. And in that time, I edited The Curse of Ophelia. I had a bunch of beta readers read it. I started dozens of other projects that maybe got like a quarter of the way done or maybe halfway done if I was lucky. But I kept coming back to this one. This was the one that I just had a feeling that I was like, this is going to be the first book I publish. Like,
Wow.
I just knew it was going to be the first one, even though it wasn't the first book I had written. And I had so many other unfinished projects. I just knew that it was this. And so I was querying that again. And then my dad actually said to me, because I was explaining the difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing to him. And he was
Which
like,
is
well,
confusing. Yeah. I mean, it's
it
complicated.
is. If you're not involved in it, it's kind of just like, well, what's the difference?
Mm-hmm.
And he was just like, well, why wouldn't you just do it yourself? And I was like, I don't have a good answer other than I'm scared.
Mm-hmm.
And other than I want the external validation of the publishing industry. And once I realized that was my only reason I wasn't doing it, I was like, that's not a good enough reason. And I dove in, and the rest is history.
And you did it. And I'm so glad that you did. Oh my gosh. Wow. What a story, Nicole. That's amazing. You know, it's so interesting too. I've spoken with other authors, and they've also talked about the role of like the pandemic with helping them to write, you know, and to do the thing that they love and to get back to that. I think it's really incredible that you started like writing when you were 12. I mean, you've always been a writer, but beginning to write a book at age 12, oh my word. And that you thought you were going to be
It was
published at age 16.
it
That's
was like scribbled
incredible.
in a notebook, and it was probably like
Uh-huh.
50 wide ruled pages long, and I thought it
I
was a whole
love
book.
it.
But I
Oh.
still have it somewhere. I can't get rid of that thing ever.
Don't get rid of that. No. Gosh, that's so sweet. Like little inner Nicole, like wrote that, and now you're back to your love of writing. That's amazing. And then, okay, where did you go to undergrad, did you say?
I went to UCSB, University of California, Santa Barbara.
Okay. And then you studied, did you say creative writing there, or was that just in grad school?
No, there I was a communications major,
Okay.
but creative writing was in grad school.
Yeah. So when you were in college, I mean, clearly writing has always been so important to you. So when you went to college, was there some fear there of like dedicating yourself to writing, or were you, do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
I
what was the decision there?
looking back on it, I wish that I had majored in something more creative, or even, English or literature, because that was always what I liked. Like in high school, that was my subject that I loved. But I was definitely afraid. I was afraid that, that's not a realistic career choice, and all of
Absolutely.
those things that you hear people saying to you. And I listened to them. So I went to school and then got a job in marketing. And, it was
Mhm.
great, but it wasn't what I was meant to be doing.
Mhm. It wasn't fully you, like your heart wasn't fully in it. And yet,
Mm-hmm.
even though you majored in that, right, you still landed where you landed. Like you're still here, you know?
Exactly.
I think the
Things
journey
work
still
out the
took
way
you
they're
here.
supposed to.
Yes. And you were in London for a year writing. That's
I know.
amazing.
I'm so fortunate I was
Oh
able
my
to do that.
gosh. Yes. Yeah. Which school in London were you at?
It's called Birkbeck University of London.
Okay.
It's really tiny. It's just right in the center of London. So the campus
Yeah.
is, you know, just among all of these old historic
Mhm.
buildings. And
Gosh, what an
yeah,
inspiration, like a place for inspiration to write.
I know. I would just wander around the city, honestly.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I don't know. I just got this image. This is so random. Have you ever read A Discovery of Witches? I've talked about this with another author. Have you
I
read that?
haven't read it. I've heard it's
Okay.
so good.
It is. It's really good. And Diana, I just thought of her. Like she goes there and she like studies and I don't know, just like the vibes of like being in
Yeah, it's
London
true.
with the old buildings, the architecture. Like I would be like going to cafes probably and drinking my iced coffee or tea or whatever.
No, exactly. It's like there's inspiration around every corner in that
Uh-huh.
city, I swear.
Yeah. Nicole, I'm living vicariously through you, even though this happened in your past.
I am living vicariously through my past as well. So
Okay. So then Oh my gosh. Okay. So you graduated, pandemic happened, and then wait, did you have a job and then pandemic happened? Like, what was the schedule? I'm just curious, the timeline there,
Yeah.
and then getting to London.
So I graduated from undergrad in 2019 and, started my job immediately in Santa Barbara and stayed there for a couple years.
Mhm.
So pandemic hit, and then I moved to London fall of 2021.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
September of 2021. Yeah.
Yeah. And that decision to go into full time writing, was it a gradual process or was it something like, your dad had that conversation with you and it was like a light bulb going off and you're like, no, I'm going to do it? Or, you know what I mean?
So I was in grad school already when I had that conversation with my
Okay.
dad. I was actually he was visiting me over in London,
Okay.
and I think we were somewhere for the weekend, and we were just like having a conversation at dinner, and I was just explaining it to him, and
Mhm.
it definitely was still very scary because I'm a research oriented person. So I was like, well, I have to do all of my due diligence. I have to figure out how you actually even go about this process. I know it's a huge financial investment because you're not making any money when you're starting out with at least the first book. And um, in my situation, it took me a few books even to start making a little bit of profit. So it's definitely a huge investment and a lot of time and a lot of mental energy, and it can be really draining. And I had to really think about it. But that was the first time that I thought it was really a possibility. And then I scheduled everything so because I knew I was going to either be able to stay in London and try to find a job in London and live there after grad school, or I was going to come home and pursue writing and be able to move back in. I still live with my mom now. Um, Move back in with her so that I could save money on rent and
Yeah.
pursue writing that way. So I knew I was picking between these two things that are both huge dreams, like getting to live in London or pursuing this career. And it took a lot of thinking and a lot of decision making to decide what was really going to be the best route for me. But I don't regret it at all. I am so grateful that I took this path.
I am so grateful that you did too. Wow. What a journey, Nicole, to get to where you're at right now. And I can imagine too when you take that leap and you write your first book and then your second book, and then, you know, money starts to come in to cover the cost. Like, whew, that would be kind of scary and feel pretty vulnerable. I would,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's especially because it's something artistic and
yeah.
it's extremely subjective. You know,
Mhm.
every reader is going to look at every book differently, and you just have to know that that's what's going to happen because it is art. So
Mhm.
it's definitely vulnerable putting books out in the world, but if you have a story to tell, I definitely encourage people to do it.
Yeah. And this series is so creative. And like what we were saying earlier, I mean, there are so many complexities with that. So as you were developing a story, are you more of a plotter? Do you kind of create as you go? Like, how does that work, your process?
I definitely plot because if I write without knowing where I'm going, it'll be such a mess. But I leave a lot of wiggle room. Like
Mhm.
my characters will definitely adjust things as they go, and my first drafts are nowhere near my final drafts, and I know that about myself. I know that my first draft is just getting things down, and then everything will be shifted around and fine tuned later. So I consider myself a plotter, but I definitely leave a lot of room on the back end.
Mhm. Hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. And the way that you really listen to your characters too,
Yeah,
and that they have a
they're pretty
voice in
loud.
it. Yeah, that's great. Well, and they are like reading your series, they're vulnerable. Like they each have such a deep personal story. And
Mhm.
it was just really fascinating. I don't know. It helps me
No,
to feel more invested in the story. And I say this
that
every
was what
single
I
time I
wanted
talk to someone.
in
Yeah.
that. So I'm glad that that
Oh, yeah.
translates that way because it is, especially the first book. The first book is primarily Ophelia's point of view, but I wanted it to still be everyone's story. And, we'll definitely see that through the last two main books, aside from the novella. We will definitely see how this is really, especially the core six of them, majorly. they all have really, really big roles to play in the overall plot, not just
Mhm.
in Ophelia's personal journey. So
Yeah.
the yeah, we'll see a lot more of development from all the side characters.
Yeah, and there are so many different characters, and I love that in I don't know, like keeping them all straight. It would be pretty
Yeah,
intense, but especially in like the trials of Ophelia, and maybe it's in the other ones, but I read the other ones on Kindle. So I don't know. But there's like the pronunciation guide and like a whole list of all of the characters, which was really, really helpful for me so that I could keep flipping back and being like, okay, referencing,
I need
that.
that too. Anytime
Yeah.
I read a book, I'm the worst at remembering who's who and everything. So
Mhm.
I find those really useful.
Yeah. And I love a good map too. And I refer back to that. I don't know. Can I show this map? Is that okay? That's not a,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
yeah. Who
Yeah.
created your map?
She's actually another author. Her name is Abigail Hare, and she wrote "From the Mouths of Sirens" was her first book, and I believe the sequel just came out um, maybe last week or so.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so she's done my map, and she's done a few other fantasy maps that I know of.
Yeah. I mean, considering that you were in grad school in 2021, I mean, we're only in 2024, so you have written quite a bit in the past couple of years. So, how long does it typically take for you to write a book?
My
I mean, really,
first
if you think about it, because didn't these come out last year or the year before?
Yeah, so book one came out February of 2023. Book
Yeah,
two came out August of 2023, and then Trials came out in March
in
of
March.
2020. I'm trying to get it out as quickly as possible without, sacrificing on quality, obviously,
Mhm.
because it is my first series, and I want to get it out to readers as fast as I can. But for first drafts, it'll typically take me like maybe 3 months if I can really sit down and work on it. And like I said, that's a really messy first draft. I'm not a clean drafter and I just have to get them done. So
Mhm.
it's about 3 months or so of like really dedicated drafting, and then probably another 6 months between me and my various editors
Mhm.
until I feel like it's a book that people can read.
Yeah.
And this year has been especially busy because I've been balancing, three different releases in the 2024 calendar year. So I've had to
Yes.
manage my timeline really carefully of, okay, these weeks I have to edit this book and then these weeks I have to go back to this one. So it's definitely a lot of a balancing act.
For sure. Yeah, no, that is a lot. And then, I mean, I would think that you have to be pretty detail oriented too, while still keeping like the big picture. Like, but
Mhm.
detail oriented in the sense of like, because you are self publishing, you're doing marketing. I'm like honored to be on your street team. I love it.
I'm so
But
grateful.
you're,
I'm so grateful to all of
yes,
the team members.
it's so, yes. And then you're doing like different conferences too, or whatever, like like you did a Polycon, like, you're doing others too, aren't you? Obviously.
Yeah, well, not in 2024, but in 2025,
Okay.
I'm going to three.
Yeah.
So I'll be at Romantasy Con, or Romantasy Book Con, which is in LA in February,
Mhm.
which is great for me because I live in LA, so I can actually just like be at home and go to that one, which is going to be really nice. All my friends at home are like, "Can we go?" And then I'm returning to a Polycon, which I'm really, really excited about because I had so much fun this year. And
Mhm.
I will be at Villains and Vixens, which is in Texas in September in
Yes.
Dallas.
Yeah, I have a book friend and she's helping put that together, which is so cool.
Oh my gosh, I'm
That you're
so
going to
excited
be
for it.
there.
It's going to
That
be
is
so
so
good.
fun. Yes, I was super bummed. Polycon tickets, man. I mean, it is like the Eras tour for Taylor Swift. It
Yeah,
was so hard, and
yeah,
I
it's
didn't get them.
it's the Hunger
Uh,
Games of 2024.
it really is. I'm like, come on, Eventbrite, work. But that is so exciting though that you're doing these things, and but that's another layer to what you have to keep track of, right? Like, I mean, you're writing, you've
Yeah,
got
it's a lot.
marketing, which I don't know if that falls under that, but yeah,
You have to wear a million hats as an indie
yeah,
author, writing, editing, product management or project management because you have to make sure that everything on the production schedule is getting done. When's the cover going to be booked, and When am I going to give feedback for that? When am I going to give briefs to artists so that I have art to post to market the book? And all of these little things that you don't necessarily think about until you're doing it. And then, yeah, the events are a big part of it too. And I'm very lucky because my mom is my assistant for my events, and she's a big fantasy romance reader.
Great.
And she went to a Polycon with me and just helped me, the week before, really getting everything ready, sat down with spreadsheets, made sure we had all of our ducks in a row. So that was great. She's going to be at my 2025 events too. So I'm very
That is so
grateful.
much fun.
Yeah,
Are you close with your mom? Sorry
yeah,
to
I am.
throw
No,
that
we're
on you.
we're
Yeah.
very close, and like I said earlier, I live at home now, so
Yeah.
it's really nice to have her as my live-in assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And she's
Yeah.
always very willing to help out with things. So
Yeah. Wow. And then remind me, are you from LA then?
yeah, I grew
Okay.
up here.
Okay, great. And so how has that been living with mom while writing? And I don't know,
Well,
how's
like I
that
said,
balance
she's
been?
very supportive, and
Huh?
she definitely always acknowledges how hard I'm working, which is also really nice because I realize that a lot of authors, their families don't quite get it, and it's not that they're not supportive, but they don't understand how much work it takes. So it's really nice because my mom sees it every day, so she's really understanding of that, and she wants me to make this dream come true. So that's really great. And the rest of my family is also very supportive. And I have a really good, my best friends from childhood are still live near me too. So I have a really good non-bookish support system outside of all of my, author friends and reader friends too.
Oh, that's great. I was wondering how that worked of if your friends also read fantasy romance or if you have your bookish world of supporters and then your friends are still supporters, right? But
Yeah,
it's
that's my
interesting because
support plan. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But they're very supportive, and anytime
Mhm.
something big happens, they're like, we have to go out and celebrate. And when I recently signed with an agent, they were like, when are we going out to celebrate? So it's yeah,
Oh,
they're very supportive.
yeah. That's awesome. And then because I'm learning about all of this too, what is the role of your agent then? When did you sign your agent? Was that
I signed
before these books came out?
No, I signed with an agent
Okay.
in May, so very
Oh,
recently. So
congratulations.
thank you. So a lot of times there's kind of different roles an agent can play, and this is the conversation that you would have, before signing with them. But sometimes it's, taking a series that you're in the process of publishing or that is already published and complete, and they'll submit that to publishing houses. Or sometimes, and this is more what we're focusing on,
Okay.
um, subrights and foreign translations and things like that. So
Oh,
there are a lot of things that, you can do a lot as an indie author, but there are a lot of doors that are still not open to indies. And so that's where it is really helpful. It's going to be really, I think, fingers crossed,
mm-hmm.
beneficial for my career in the long run to have this
Mm-hmm.
advocate and, help me along the way.
Yeah. Well, and you've done so much, obviously, so much work up until this point. I wonder how that will help to this process.
Mhm.
If you do shift more into, it sounds like traditional publishing, maybe? Is that
Yeah, we're
or,
right now a little more hybrid. Um,
okay.
yeah,
Gosh. Yeah.
I'm still, the Curse of Ophelia is still an indie series. She's
Okay.
not going anywhere right now.
She's awesome. Hey guys, I want exciting news and some updates from some of the authors I get to interview. So Nicole Platania has a giveaway to enter to win a free copy of The Breaker of Stars. And what you need to do is, if you want to try to win one of those, is go to her Instagram and find all the deets there. Otherwise, that book is going to be releasing July 25th, so you guys can pre-order for that. And then also she has a pre-order incentive to receive some art for ordering that book, which is really cool. Also, Courtney Wynn, author of Vesseless, is now represented by the Transatlantic Agency, which is really exciting, wonderful news for her and her journey. I can't wait to see what comes of it and the future projects for her. VB Lacey also will be releasing her audiobook for Forever Rain July 25th. So that is really exciting. Be on the lookout for that if you like audiobooks. Lastly, Cian Crawford. They are working on their second book of the Fae Spy Academy, which I cannot wait. And it will be titled Veil of Dreams. The cover is gorgeous. I got a sneak peek. And guys, you do not want to miss this series. It is so good. If you haven't read any of their books, go check them out. They're highly, highly entertaining, epic, romantasy, fantasy, romance. It's so good. So those are some of the updates for this week. Thank you so much. And now back to the interview. Is there a character from your books that you connect with most, or?
Definitely Ophelia. I mean, they all have little pieces of me in them because I tend to find something that I can relate to, and it helps me to get into their head more, even if I don't relate to everything about them. But Ophelia is always the one that I come back to time and time again, just because she's the North Star.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she's my girl. I love her.
Yeah.
So like, what about her do you feel like you relate to most? Like,
I think
is it her
that,
personality or?
so as we kind of mentioned before, she starts off book one in a very dark place, and writing that and writing some events that happened in shards were, it was all very therapeutic for me, for things that had happened years before in my past that I hadn't, I thought, I was over them, I had healed from them, I had moved on from them, but there were still things that just kind of like thorns that get caught in your brain that I didn't really realize I hadn't fully gotten over. So I was able to really get into her character through sort of those darker parts and processing my own emotions through writing. So
I
that's
think
really,
that,
yeah.
yeah, this has to be so cathartic, and I've talked about this in another interview too. Sorry guys, but narrative therapy is a therapeutic process and technique, of like,
Mhm.
even if it isn't verbatim, right? Obviously, you're not living in a fantasy world, but like exactly what's happened to you, but like themes that you can process through
Yeah, and
and relate
even
to different.
certain events that happen in the shards of
Yeah.
Ophelia. And it was sort of like, she makes a decision that I wish I had made. And that I was like, okay, well, I wasn't strong enough to make that decision, but now I'm going to feel as if I did through this character and like see her get to the other side of it. And it's going to be great.
And it sounds like too, through these characters, there are different goals and intentions of like healing and like what have you thought about that? Like what goals and intentions do you have for these different characters?
Yeah, I know where they're all going to end up. And a lot of times I know, well, not a lot of times, with all of the main six, especially, I kind of knew what their biggest battles were going to be along the
Mm-hmm.
way, internally, that is, and how, and that they were going to have to overcome either false beliefs of themselves or maybe something that they didn't even know about yet. And I knew what that was going to be, and kind of how they're overcoming it is what I'm discovering with each book.
Yeah. I was going to say there are a ton of mental health like themes and implications in this series. And I think that that's, I mean, it can be found in so many different types of genres and
Mhm.
especially like fantasy romance. There tends to be a ton of like mental health implications, whether it's like trauma or
Yeah.
loss or, you know, um, and so I was wondering if, if you had experienced any of that in order to like better write these characters, because I mean, or you're, just deeply aware human being.
Um, I like to think I'm a very aware human being.
Uh-huh.
I also
Yeah.
definitely had my own share
Mhm.
of mental health struggles, or just periods of time in my life where I've faced certain things that I have learned a lot from. And I think that it really helps to explore them in a fantasy setting because, there's kind of a safety in there, in the sense that it's an imagined world. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, nothing bad's going to happen to me in this world. So it's kind of a safe place to explore feelings for me, at least. And I think for some readers, it's a good way to escape, but also be
Yes.
seen.
Yes. And it can be so deeply healing for the reader too, and I know it's so important and you have included these as well, like the trigger warnings before starting the
Yeah.
series, and just to be aware too as a reader of like, what your triggers may or may not be, but
Hmm.
I think it can be incredibly healing. And I do love the stories, right, where it's like the character growth and arc, like where the character does dig deep and heal.
I've been finishing up the Lost God series, which has a ton of mental health representation
Mm.
in it. Explores a
Mhm.
lot of different mental health themes.
Mhm. And I love that it's more and more prevalent, and like discussed without shame, and it's out there, for people. And it sounds like it's been a way for you to process through some of your emotions and some of your experiences. And then also it's great for the reader too, because we can escape into these worlds and process too, you
Yeah,
know?
I think that's one of the really great boundaries that indie authors are pushing too, especially is
Yeah.
a, a lot of times because we write from, well, every writer writes from such a raw and vulnerable place, but I think sometimes you see a little bit more of that in an indie book because they're coming so much from our labor of love, whereas traditional and published books have to be passed through so many other hands in order to get approved and finalized. So I do think that indie authors are really doing a great job in bringing that to light.
Oh, I think so too. I think that's a really good point, Nicole. That makes sense. Yeah. And it sounds like for you, we've said this a couple of times, but like the Curse of Ophelia and then through the Shards of Ophelia, it was like a cathartic process for you. And Ophelia makes a different choice in
Hmm.
her life. So I wonder, yeah, that must have felt really therapeutic for you to like lean into that a little bit of like,
Yeah, it was a healing lesson, and I think it was a teaching moment, and it was something that so Ophelia's 20 years old at this point, and it's something that I'm like, when I was 20, I would have wanted to see this. I would have wanted to see someone making this choice. And so I was like, maybe someone will pick it up in the future and at the right moment when they need it.
I don't know if you can share this, but do you have any plans to do audio versions of some of your books?
Stay tuned.
Okay.
That's about all I can say right now.
I will take it. I will take it. All of these characters are so magnificent in their different ways, but like especially the men in the series. I feel like I could have crushes on all of them. How is that for you writing that? What was that?
No, definitely.
I mean, they're like babes. And like, I don't know. Oh, so sexy. So like how has that been writing those these types of characters that have such strong sex appeal, which they do. All of them.
you know, we write fantasy books for a reason. We write what we want to see. No, it's definitely fun. I wanted to write characters who are attractive and know that they're attractive. They're confident about it, but they're not cocky in an annoying way. Some
Uh-huh.
of them can definitely be a little cocky, but it's normally as a joke.
Uh-huh. No, and it's so endearing.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I feel like I married one of those. I feel like I married a Tolek. He's a keeper. Are you in a relationship right now? Like, do you base any of your characters off of like real life relationships?
No, not romantically. I will say that like the friendships are definitely,
Uh-huh.
you know, inspired by friends that I've had in my life. Just kind of that ride or die friendship and the people that will always have your back is definitely based off of people in my life,
Yeah.
but not romantically. It's all just fantasy and fictional there.
I was gonna say too, those relationships, the tight knit, they are so tight knit, like in the series, Ophelia and like the found family, but then also like her sister, Jezebel. I
Hmm.
hope that's okay to say that too. They've got a great, like, very close relationship.
Yeah.
Do you have any siblings? Did you base that off of like
I have an older
sibling
brother.
relationships or friendships? Okay.
Yeah, I have an older brother. Sibling stories are also another thing that's like an unintentional theme in my writing. I always tend to include siblings for some reason. I just kind of gravitate towards it, towards including it. I think that it's a really great way to get to know characters is through their families and through their siblings. And it kind of gives them either like a weak spot for Ophelia, like Jezebel would definitely be a weak spot for her because she wants to protect her, or a spot that you can tell that they've been through something that's really hardened them if it's not a good sibling relationship.
Mhm.
Or if they're a character that has no siblings and wants siblings, then that tells a lot about them too. So I just think the different family dynamics really help you get to know the characters.
Yeah, agreed. And those family dynamics, I think, can play a huge role, obviously, in their character development and who they are and personality and all the things. It's interesting the way that, like, hearing you also talk about like your relationship with your mom. Like, I feel like seems to be it has to be probably pretty strong given the fact that she's like pretty helpful and involved in your life and you're living with her, which feels different than Ophelia's relationship with her mom, you know. And I know I'm
Very
not
different.
saying I'm not like, you know, but I think it's interesting, you know, being able to draw some from your experiences and then write from like completely different perspectives, because
Yeah,
that would be a completely different perspective for you.
exactly. And I think that's where the characters really come to life too. Is
Uh-huh.
when you find
Yeah.
those things that you're like, you're no longer basing it off of your own experience, and you're kind of like, oh wait, this makes so much sense for her or him. Like this is where
Mhm.
she gets XYZ trait or where she shows this.
Mhm.
That's when they really start to come to life.
Yeah, I love that. Is there any character that was difficult for you to write?
Um, I
I don't know.
I find them all fairly easy to get into their mindsets on different days. So there are some days when I'm like, okay, I can only write Ophelia today for whatever reason, and then
Mhm.
when I sat down to write the novella, Cypherian's voice was just so easy to slip right into, which was something I was worried about because it was a completely new character. I had never written his point of view before, or his or
Mhm.
Vale's. So I was like, I'm very excited to like get into this, but I'm also nervous. And then when I started writing them, they flowed very naturally. Um,
Mhm.
so that was really a nice surprise. But it sometimes will just depend on the day of who is wanting to talk that day.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And do you think because of like Cypherian and Vale's roles, like up until this point, I mean, they've been pretty involved. Like, do
Mm-hmm.
you think that that kind of helped possibly with like shifting into a book solely on their perspective? And it also
Yeah.
sounds like though it's a little bit different too, because you said there's a little bit more romance in this one, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there are still, the plot of this book definitely ties in to the overall series plot,
Yeah.
but it is a lot more romance forward, and it's their second chance romance and everything that comes along with that while they're going through the steps of trying to figure out what's going
Right.
wrong with her. So I
Hmm.
definitely think that because I had written them before, because they'd been on the page so much, and I mean, with him, I've known him for 3 books. So he's been around the whole time, and I knew what he sounded like on the outside,
Hmm.
and I knew and all about his backstory and the things that drove him and why he was the way he was and why he reacted to things the way he reacted to things. So that definitely made it a lot easier because it wasn't starting totally from the bottom.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that that makes sense. So, what was it like writing a more romance forward book? Because that is a that is a shift. I mean, not saying there isn't romance, right, in the other books, but like
Yeah,
there's a ton of fantasy and world building and all the things.
yeah, exactly. I would definitely say that in the main series, the fantasy aspects outweigh the
Uh-huh.
romance a little bit. But this one, it was really fun to write, and I had, I started writing it immediately, or actually, I was still writing trials when I started writing this, so I kind of needed that brain break before
Mm.
shifting over into drafting myths. So it was really nice to just switch gears a little bit so that my brain could practice something else.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little bit of like, I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it also.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
was it was really fun. It was really fun to write their story, and I definitely think that in the future I will be writing um, some more romance heavy books. There's always going to be fantasy. There are always going to be fantasy romance, but some books that definitely focus a little bit more on the romance than the Curse of Ophelia.
Yeah. And I know you said, okay, so you have an idea of like other books. Are
Mm-hmm.
they going to be connected to the same world, do you think, for another series, or are they going to be completely different?
No, so
Can you even say?
I have quite a few ideas. I know which one I'm going to be diving into next, unless something completely blows up my plan. But as of now, I know what series I'll be doing next. I'm going to finish this one before I release anything else. Um, and it's in the same world, but it's completely different characters and a different warrior clan and everything. So it'll almost feel like a new world because you're getting such a different part of it, but it's still going to be in this world, and there will be, the opportunity maybe for some cameos of characters that we do know to pop up throughout the series.
I love that.
I know,
Great.
I do too, but they won't be the main characters. The main
Uh-huh.
characters, it'll
Sure.
be completely new. So we'll get a whole new cast of people to fall in love with. And I have
Hmm.
quite a few ideas for series like that, and then some that are in adjacent worlds that build off of this world
Mhm.
and things like that. So there's a lot of groundwork being laid throughout the Curse of Ophelia series, particularly in books 4 and 5, um, for other things I
Yeah.
want to do.
Cool. So you also did mention earlier in the conversation that you will be exploring maybe more the Fae folks too. And you just said a different warrior clan, right? For
Yeah,
another
so
one? Okay.
I don't have any intention right now, and this could change tomorrow.
Mhm.
To write a solely Fae book or
Mhm.
series. I think that
Mhm.
there are a lot of authors out there who write the Fae really well, and I think that I really like hanging out with my warriors and my angels and
Uh-huh.
having the Fae be sort of a side story. Um,
Mhm.
so right now, that's where I'm at with that. They will definitely be involved in the rest of this series, though.
Can you say what warrior clan you want to work on for the next series, or no? It's okay if you
Not
don't want
yet.
to.
I'm gonna hold on to that for a little bit more, but I have intentions
Uh-huh.
of a few of them, a few of the different.
Okay. I'm so excited. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm
And I
really
love
excited.
that you've created this world and then we get to dive deeper into another clan.
Yeah, that's
That's
what I'm
so
excited
cool.
about because a lot of people have said that they, um, not necessarily in a negative way, but that they want to see more of the world and more of the magic, and um, that they want to learn more about how all the different magic systems work. And honestly, there's so much going on in the Curse of Ophelia series as it is that if I was going to explore all of the different magic systems, because really each warrior clan has their own magic system, it the series would never get written. So that's why I'm kind of doing
Yeah.
it this way, because I also really want to explore all those different pieces of the world. And I think it's
Yeah.
best to give them each their own attention.
No, I love that. Yeah, I mean, that would be really overwhelming to try to do it all in one.
Yeah,
But
I
I
don't
am
think readers
excited
would
to,
enjoy that either.
yeah, oh my gosh. So it'll be really exciting to see different parts of the world and go more, yeah,
Yeah,
deep into those.
I'm excited for it.
That'll be really cool. And then The Breaker of Stars, which is coming out July 25th,
Mhm.
correct? That's the novella, and that's Cypherian and Vale. And then the fourth book, Myths of Ophelia, that'll be out November 21st.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit more about that, or will that be too spoilery?
Well,
That might be hard to do. Yeah, that might be hard to
without giving away what
do.
happened in Trials, if you've read Trials, you might kind of know where this is going, but it
Correct.
is really going to explore, as given away by the title, the mythology, and a lot of mythology that is sort of known but unknown, like things that aren't necessarily believed in this world are maybe going to be forced to the surface and have to be
Mhm.
explored. It's going to be a lot more magic. Um, Things that we kind of saw at the end of Trials in that sense are going to be brought back and
What
explored and
the hell?
confirmed.
Mhm.
um, and then, there was a really big win that occurred at the end of Trials for
Mhm.
our characters. And that kind of leaves some holes on the surface of, well, now that that's happened, what's going to happen next? That's kind of taken
Yeah.
care of. So I think that people will be very intrigued by what happens next because there's a lot of really good, juicy things coming to the surface. And I actually think it's the fastest paced of all the books so far. So it's got a lot packed.
Well, and Trials is pretty fast paced, I feel like.
There's,
And
yeah, there's a lot of,
like there's a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's even more in Myths personally.
Wow. Cool. I can't wait. Well, and we might need to cut this, but like we don't even know really if like what the angels are wanting her to do.
We see
I
more
don't
of them.
know.
We will see
Ah!
a lot more of them in books 4 and 5.
Because we
So
might be discovering that a certain ancestor of a certain character may not have been totally represented correctly.
who
Do you
knows?
know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about,
Okay.
but
My
who knows?
brain at the end of this book,
Yeah.
at the end of Trials, was blown. Queen. So yeah, this was so good.
Yeah,
And then
it's a lot.
this is again a very random question, but when you are creating these like covers, do you like have intentions obviously of it like representing the story of like this particular, does that make sense? Like how do
Yeah, do
you
you mean the
create,
design or the color?
yes, the design, sorry. Oh yeah, and also the color.
um, well, yes. So for book one, I always knew that I wanted to be building off of book one.
Mhm.
So book one, we started with the star on there to represent the North Star
Uh-huh.
bind, the tattoo.
Mhm.
And I wanted it to grow from there. So it's just been a matter of asking myself what elements kind of, I'm looking at the book
Mhm.
on my shelf right now. What elements kind
Mhm.
of help tell the story more. So I mean, for book two, with the star kind of breaking and the title is The Shards of Ophelia. So without spoiling anything, that kind of explains itself. And then for Trials, I think Trials is a cover where once you read it and you sort of know some of the events, then you can look back at the cover and see some hints of things that you maybe didn't know about before. So that one was really fun.
And it's interesting as I was reading Trials, I got some like I do love a good quest book, and I feel like there were some really fun quests that they went on to
Mhm.
find certain things. Maybe I don't know.
It's a hunt for magical items.
A hunt. It's a hunt. It's definitely a hunt. Um yeah, and earlier this is another rando question. You guys, I'm so sorry I'm all over the place. You were talking about some of your favorite books too, and that you were wanting to create a series that like you felt similarly to reading some of your favorite books. So what are some of your favorite books?
Oh boy, it's such a loaded question. And I actually feel like
I
it's
know.
changed so much even in the past like year and a half.
Yeah.
Um, or like 2 years or so since I've started reading more and more indie authors. Um, but I mean, I was definitely like trying to think back to what I was even reading when I started writing The Curse of Ophelia. I think it was a mix of a lot of different types of books
Mhm.
where I was reading, I had read all the Sarah J. Maas books, and that's one that really, connected me with her characters, and that's the feeling where I was like, I want to make readers feel the way I do about these characters, and that's one of those that kind of
Mhm.
started that. Um,
Yeah, you succeeded in that for sure.
well, thank you.
I think it like the way that I feel about her characters is the way I feel about your characters, truly.
Oh, thank you.
I'm as emotionally connected to your characters as I am to Sarah's characters.
That's such high praise. So
So
thank you.
everybody needs to read this series. If you like Sarah's characters, you will love Nicole's characters too.
Thank you. Um,
Yeah.
I also, at the time, I had read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is one of the
Oh
books that just
yeah.
has always stuck with me more because of the writing. I just love
Mhm.
her poetic
Mhm.
writing style, and I've read a bunch of um, V. Schwab's other books that I have also adored. And um, then in the past like year and a half, I say some of the books that are, the top of my book recommendations list now are all indie authors who some of them I like didn't even know them personally. I read their book and then I'm like in their DMs and I'm like, okay, I adore you and your book. Let's be friends now.
Oh,
But
cool.
some that I've read that I have loved. I love the House of Devil series by Kayla Edwards. That's
Hmm, I
urban
have to write that
fantasy.
down.
So, if you're a fan of, Crescent City,
Yeah.
perfect. The Lady of Darkness series is another big favorite of mine. I said earlier that I'm like 100, not even 100 pages, maybe 50 pages from the end of the last book in the Lost God series,
Mhm.
which
Oh, yeah.
is
Mhm.
just phenomenal and really great mental
Mhm.
health representation. I've also
And
been,
I've been seeing that series everywhere. Sorry, go ahead.
oh my gosh, no,
I've been seeing that around.
that
Yeah.
series needs so much more hype. It is so, so good.
I'll have to check it out.
Blood and Steel, the Legends of Desmond
Mhm.
series, that one is another
I have not
phenomenal.
read that one yet. Yeah.
That one's great. That one's epic fantasy romance, and it is so good.
So good.
I'm not finished with that one yet, so I'll probably be going back to that one
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
soon.
Nice. Yeah, how do you balance reading and writing?
I have not gotten much time to read this year, unfortunately. It's
Yeah.
been really slow,
Mhm.
but this month is sort of my break month where I'm catching up on all of my admin tasks that I
Mhm.
neglected, and doing a lot of plotting and preparation for future projects and making more time to read for sure because I'm between deadlines right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And as an indie author, you get to set your own deadlines, right?
Yeah, I do. I get to set my
Yeah.
own deadlines.
Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah.
Well, Nicole, anything else that you feel like you want to share with the listeners, some of your readers?
I just want to thank everyone so much. I want to thank you for having me and for being so supportive. Um, and yeah, just thank my street team, ARC readers, beta readers, anyone who might listen to this and maybe decide to pick up my book. Anyone who's commented on something on social media or anything of that sort, just thank you so much because indie authors really, really, really don't get very far without all of your help and all of your support and all of your love on our characters and our stories. So it can really change our lives completely.
Love that. And yeah, everyone, you can find Nicole's books on her website,
Mhm.
Nicole Platania, .com, and then also find her on Instagram. Yeah, how else? And then any major like book retailer, you can
Yeah,
find her books.
they should
Indie
be,
bookstores.
yeah, indie bookstores and libraries can order them for you if requested. They should be
Yeah.
available online at all retailers.
Yeah.
The occasional Barnes and Noble will have them, but very few. So you could always ask there too if that's where you prefer to shop.
Awesome. Nicole, this has been so much fun.
Yeah, thank you so
Um,
much. I've had a great time.
yes. Yeah, cool. And I cannot wait to read The Breaker of Stars coming out and then yeah, The Myths of Ophelia in November.
Yeah,
Which I don't know, the vibe of reading during fall is really fun.
it's the perfect time.
Like it's the perfect time.
Yeah,
And so I'm excited to do that with your book that's coming out.
yeah,
So
I'm very excited. We
thank
will
you.
hopefully be
Thank you
doing
so
some
much.
sort of reread for anyone who might be interested, either hasn't read it yet or wants to reread it or anything like that. We'll hopefully have something leading up to that, and it'll be in my Discord. So join that
Cool.
or join my
Yes.
newsletter or wherever you like to get your news.
Perfect. Yeah, I was going to say because there's Instagram, Discord, newsletter. Yeah,
Those are my big
different
three
ways to
for sure.
reach
I'm,
you.
I'm on TikTok and stuff, but the algorithm doesn't like me very much on there, so I do my best.
Why? Is it because of the subject? Like you
Just
have to
no, it's
censor? Is
just
that
one of
what you were
those ones
saying earlier?
I haven't been able to crack it yet, but I'm
Huh.
gonna keep trying. Maybe one day I will.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, and I hope that you have a good rest of your day. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this interview with fantasy romance author Nicole Platania. She's the author of the Curse of Ophelia series, and as we discussed, her novella comes out July 25th, and then the fourth book in the series comes out November 21st. I did get the amazing opportunity to read the advanced reader copy for The Breaker of Stars, and oh my word, it was phenomenal. And truly, I think it might even be the best in the series so far. I don't know. I also love Trials. The whole series is wonderful, so highly, highly recommend. I had so much fun talking with her about her writing process, her characters, also mental health representation in the series, and also just in fantasy as a whole. Also her future projects, and so much more. So guys, thank you so much for being here, for listening to the podcast, focused on celebrating and promoting authors who write fanciful stories that make my heart sing. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Romantasy Library. There are many, many more episodes to come with amazing authors, as well as deep dives into various writing processes, general life conversations, some spicy spice, mental health discussions, favorite tropes, and just so many more tangents. If you're feeling generous, please feel free to leave a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much for being here and helping celebrate these amazing authors.